Okay, so I'm going to go through very quickly the requirements for the aeronautical engineering assignment or engineering report. So, the report requirements, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, aside to say that it needs to look like a report, it needs to have referencing, it needs to have page numbers, introductions, it needs to have a table of contents. These things are all specified by the, we're using the University of Wollongong standard, which you can see at the bottom of this page by Bob Wee-Way. Okay, so in order for submitting the report, I have to make one small correction to say that you'll be submitting it on Moodle rather than Edmodo, because I don't use Edmodo anymore. And you need to provide a hard copy in class. Now, I want to make this really clear. This will be the third time I've said it in the time that we've been talking about this, that every student must provide their own hard copy and their own unique submission. Now, this is where I'm going to say that although this is a group project where you can work together, each student must have unique writing themselves. Every sentence has to be a sentence that you have written or a direct quote to established academic literature or some other reference. Okay, so I want to make that really clear. You can copy images from your group, right, or diagrams from your group, but anything that you've written, you need to write. Okay, so if you don't, you risk getting 0. If you're not going to be here on the day, being sick on the day of a hand-in assessment will not necessarily get you out of trouble, but if in doubt, I always say get a doctor's certificate. Yeah, question?
So we have to hand a hard copy in as well on Monday, or next time we're in class?
Okay, now I have some degree of flexibility with hard copies, but let me tell you this. When I say that I expect a digital copy and a hand-in copy, what that means is that if I get a digital copy and for some reason that file gets corrupted, I'll look at the paper copy. If you haven't handed in a paper copy and anything goes wrong, if a page is missing, the internet goes down, or something, for some reason your file is corrupted or lost, you get 0. The same is also true in reverse. If you give me a paper copy, it's possible. I have had papers go missing before, and when they have, I've gone back to the scan or the electronic submission that I've had instead. I have this as a backup. I have this as a dual mode of failure. We should all be familiar with this concept of dual modes of failure and the importance of dual modes of failure. So the point is here, if you only hand in one form, you have to learn to live with the consequences of that. So I will accept one form if that's all I have, but if anything goes wrong, the onus will then be on you, that I don't have a digital backup or I don't have a paper backup. Technically, the assignment has made it quite clear that I require both, right? So I'm going to say that the requirement is both. Yep.
Both on Monday.
Both on Monday.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Okay, remind me to come back to that after I finish recording. Okay, so the assignment is really in 2 parts, or one could say it's in 4 parts, right? We could go with part 1A, part 1B, part 1C, but so I'm going to talk about it in the terms of 2 parts. Okay, first part is industry research. So you have to research 3 different sections of the Australian aeronautical industry. You should try and focus on the Australian aeronautical industry. Okay, each of these you should approach each of these as an essay. Imagine you were writing an essay for English. How many words do you write for an essay for English?
800.
Yeah, maybe a little bit less, right? I'm going to say 500 to 700 words is what I'd consider a good standard. At the very least, right? At the very least, if you're not writing 300 words, there's no way you can cover the topic in sufficient depth. But write 300 words if you get better than 0, right? But I would say you should be aiming for 500 to 800 words is probably a reasonable.
For each of those dot points?
For not dot points, for each of these bold headings, yes. Okay. Oh, they've changed between. I have to look at the one that is on your screen. This is going to be confusing to anyone who's listening to this on an audio recording, but it is the same.
So part 1. The dot
Wait, I'm confused now.
Just wait.
What do you want?
Okay, Hilariously, we're now back on the same page. The people who are listening to the recording are now seeing the same thing that you're seeing because I'm now using version 6. Okay, yes, there are indeed 3 dot points, which is good because there's a little bit less work in the difference between version 5 and version 6. It means there's less work for you to have to write. Each of these should be one essay length essay, right? So I would suggest that you should be writing about 500 to 700 words. I'm willing for people to go a little bit over, a little bit under, but if you go under 500 words, you have to make sure you really know what you're doing. Okay, each of these should be an essay. Once you've finished your 3 essays, okay, let me quickly talk about roles of engineering related to design, production, operation of aircraft, and related infrastructure. You should be talking about more than just aeronautical engineers. You should be talking about the civil engineers who design the runways and the airports. You should be talking about the traffic control, the skills that go into that. So electrical engineering and programming that go into traffic control. You should be talking about the chemical engineers who provide the fuel for the planes. You should be talking about the environmental engineers who go into the environmental considerations and operations of airports. You should also be talking about ethical and legal requirements. This is part of the job of engineers, is understanding ethical and legal obligations. You should also be maybe considering talking about management roles rather than just strictly design and operation roles. Okay, just to go over that before we lose the thread of the conversation, I'm going to go down to the marking guidelines. So, for that section there where it says Australian aeronautical industry, it should be a detailed report of the Australian aeronautical industry, including role of engineers as designers and managers, aeronautical and other disciplines. That's the first part. For the second dot point, it says detailed explanation of the history of the impacts and influences on aviation regarding society, economy, environment, clearly talking about legal, ethical, health, and safety examples. Yeah? So you should be at least covering at least one legal or ethical consideration and at least one health or safety consideration. At least one of each in order for me to give you 10 marks for that dot point. Okay, so back to the 3 dot points. Okay, the third one, the features and benefits of an assigned aviation technology. Now, most of you by this stage have got your assigned aviation technology. If you haven't, by the end of this lesson, please stay back and I will help you to assign you one before you go. The reason why I'm assigning is just I don't want everyone to do the same one. I'd like you to have a little bit of shared knowledge so that you can feed that back to amongst yourselves. Okay, part 2, glider design. Conduct an experiment using model gliders from Balsa to investigate the effect of an assigned aspect of glider design and its effect on glide ratio. Now, glide ratio for you guys is how far it can glide. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. Yeah, we're looking for, it's like its thrust to drag ratio, right? We want to see how far it will glide before it falls. So the glide ratio is a function of how high it is from its launch point to how far it will fall. Yep. Now, for you guys, I would suggest you want to make one glider and modify it, or make 2 or 3 identical gliders. Okay. You will produce a 3D model of your glider. You'll do that on Google SketchUp or some other tool, such as Onshape would be suitable. Yep.
For that, can we work with our buddy?
You only need to have one 3D model between your group. Correct. Okay. Appropriately document your results using the following section headings specified by the University of Melbourne. Okay, I just picked University of Melbourne because I thought they had a good way of documenting scientific research. Okay, so the link is provided below on...
Where does it say Melbourne?
Faculty of Science, Medical Health... yeah,
That's Wollongong.
it does look like it's Wollongong. Maybe I decided to go with Wollongong instead.
We're on different ones in Melbourne.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
it should be Wollongong.
Yeah, okay, no, I deliberately chose Wollongong because I think that's more relevant to you guys, that you're more likely, we have a closer relationship to the Uni of Wollongong than we do Melbourne. Okay, using that link provided below, I have to update that from Melbourne to basically specified by the link below. Now, it should have 4 different headings. In that part, in your scientific research part, you should have 4 headings. You should have an introduction that states the purpose of your experiment. So this experiment is going to investigate the effect of wing ratio on the effect of gliders and the glide ratio. And then you're going to have a method describing a process. We built 3 identical gliders, or we built 1 glider and made modifications. We conducted the experiment. We launched the glider multiple times and documented the distance traveled by the glider. We accounted for variables such as release height and initial propulsion. Then you'll provide a set of results. The results will probably be shown in a table or a graph. Ideally both, but whatever works best for you. Then the discussion, it says, although we found our results determined that there was no significant advantage in increasing angle of attack, or we found that longer wings provided a greater wing ratio. This is not typically used in most commercial aircraft because of the fact that they are jet propelled. And we do not believe that the results that are applicable here would be useful in widespread application. Or in the case of, say, the angle of attack, we believe that angle of attack is critical in achieving the fastest climb rate for planes. Something along those lines, right? So the point is here, you want to have, this is our conclusion, but just because this is our conclusion, it doesn't mean we should necessarily use it in actual practice, yeah? Because you're making 30 centimeter gliders rather than 30 meter wingspans made out of aluminium. Yep, with a form of propulsion. Okay. Going back to our marking guidelines now. Okay, so for the specific assignment, again, this should just be an essay, right? And analysis of specific technology, right? It should be consideration to both technical and non-technical implications and relationships. Okay. So technical and non-technical. So that means if you're talking about a black box flight recorder, you might want to talk about how the difficulty of recording long amounts of audio, or the difficulty of recording meaningful flight data, or the difficulty of being able to send out a beacon that can be easily identified, as well as the non-technical aspects. Like, does it pick up all languages well? What are the social implications of having these black box recorders? What is the actual output of these? Does it actually, yeah?
Could it be like ease of use, like if it's understandable to people?
Exactly right. So whether or not in the case of, what's another one? Stealth, for instance. You could talk about how stealth has had, impacts on, the technological requirements of stealth. That how there's a bit of an arms race, right? Where we get better at stealth, but at the same time, the opponents also better detection, right? While at the same time, you might want to talk about stealth has aspects on international diplomacy. Does it have a positive effect on international diplomacy or a negative, or is it a mixed effect? That would be non-technical. So the effect of technologies that improve or make redundant the effect of stealth, that's technical.
Right.
Yeah? The machine that goes ping, that spots the stealth bomber, that's a technical component, the radar, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're talking about how that's affected international diplomacy, that's non-technical, right? You should be talking about both.
So like literal and more like the implications of the technical.
Exactly right. Implications and relationships. You want to talk about how stealth has affected, you might talk about, I don't know, I'm imagining, how stealth may have had flow-on effects. Because of discoveries in stealth, we may have found that other technologies like composite technologies may have been improved. So that would be a relationship. Yeah, so you want to identify what implications, how these things have changed society, and what are the links between this and other aspects of either technology or society. Yeah.
With glide instruments, like I can see how you could say about the good things it's done to society, but I can't really see any negatives, like a vertical speed indicator or something.
Okay, so in the case of instruments,
it's complex. Not everyone can use it.
or over-reliance on instruments, right?
Yeah.
So the Children of Magenta episode, for instance, where people have become overly reliant on certain technologies, which has created problems. You could also talk about non-technical implications of how steps in automation in planes have led to steps in automation in vehicles, and what are the possible implications of that in society when we start having truck drivers who are now being replaced by automated systems. Yeah.
Compared to manual flight.
Yeah. Now, I mean, even if you want to talk about things like the artificial horizon, you could talk about that's had an increase in flight safety.
Okay.
The fact that even in poor conditions, as long as those instruments are working, that people can fly. Means that we can have flights that leave more consistently, even in places with bad weather, for instance, because of the fact. And so that has a social implication. It means that people are getting home to their families. It means that goods and services are cheaper to those countries.
Got it.
Yep.
Alright.
Okay. Quality report. Now, this is important. It's worth 20% of the marks, right? Quality report's worth 20% of the marks. Now, what this means is it needs to look like a report. It needs to be typed. It needs to have page numbers. It needs to have headings, clear numbered headings. It needs to have a table of contents. I would suggest put a cover page on, right? It really makes a big difference to me when I mark an assignment and it has a cover page and it looks like the person knows what they're doing. Already, I'm primed to think, oh, this kid's going to do well. Yeah? No, it really makes a difference. I noticed this in myself, and when I've told people who do subjects like design technology where there is this aspect, right?
I'm just imagining the disappointment you see when you see my title page and you're like, oh, he's going to do well. And then it's like, oh,
Look,
no.
it happens, but better to go that way than the opposite.
Yeah.
Better to hand in something that looks really good and it ends
So
up being
you'd rather be
disappointing.
disappointed than surprised.
Pretty much, right? If you, on the other hand, hand me something on a paper towel, and then you have to work hard to get past my biases, right? Now I'm aware that I have biases. I try to avoid that, but at the same time, when you're adults and you're going to go out into even university, right? Before you're moving into the real world, these things do matter to people. Having consistent formatting and not having a report free of errors. The fact is, we've identified even in this video that I have an error, right? Even in this video that it should be Wollongong Uni. One error is acceptable, right? People will forgive and understand that it's very, very hard to write an assignment free of errors. But when it's riddled with errors, we start to have a problem. Yeah? When it's riddled with errors, we start to have a problem. Okay, so now, yep.
What type of cover letter would you like to see?
To title page.
I've already shown you sample ones, but I'll show you again after I finish recording.
Would it be like on Bob Weiwei's thing? Like the guide?
I will show you after I finish recording. I just can't do it on this computer. Now, I just want to point out my expectation of how long this should take. Ready? This essay, you should be able to write this essay, I would say, in about 1 hour, right? 1 hour to write that essay. Ideally, if you guys are working together, you could have each of you research one of these essays, to get all the references ready, and then each of you spend 1 hour to write the essay, right? So research, it might take a little bit longer. I would say, and this is something I have to say to my daughter all the time, right? My daughter's in year 8, and it's like, you're just taking too long on these assignments. If you keep taking this long, you're just going to get destroyed. Right, so you guys, I'd say research, do whatever you can in one person, assign this person, say research, do 2 hours of research, and then call it. And then after that, write it up for 1 hour. So imagine you got an assignment, just 1 hour to write that assignment. Whatever you got. Just run with it. That's it. That's all you set yourself time for. The next one, same deal. A different person will have done the research. They'll give you their research and say, these are the links that I found, these are the sources, this is the quotes I think you should use. Give yourself 1 hour to write up the assignment. Right, so I'm thinking that should be 5 hours total. 1 hour to write each of the assignments, 2 hours for the run that you had to research. Yep, 5 hours. Okay, for the glider, I would say that again, should take you a grand total of 5 hours. I would say it should take one person about an hour, maybe two to use, 2 hours maximum for the Google SketchUp thing. I think I could do it in half an hour, but I've used Google SketchUp maybe a bit more recently than you. 2 hours maximum to make it look good, right? I think to make it shouldn't take you more than 2 hours. Ideally, you probably want to have different people. Actually conducting the experiment should take you about an hour. And then some person's going to write up that assignment, and they're going to write up the tables, they're going to write up the conclusions. That's going to take them about 2 hours. The other people are then just going to type all that up together. Should take about an hour to put all of that stuff together. Yeah? So, for this assignment, it's going to take 2 hours for your part that you have to do, plus about an hour of putting it together and making it look nice. right? Plus an hour of actually standing there doing the research and calculating. So that's 4 hours. So I'm suggesting it should take 5 hours plus 4 hours, a total of 9 hours. Yep.
For the assigned technology, are we doing one per group or just one each?
One per group.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Okay. Does anyone have any questions before I hit stop on the video? No? Okay, great. Yeah, go.
Or do we have to do any like mathematical like calculations or anything to do with the plane? Like for last assignment we had to do the trusses for the bridges. For this would we be doing anything like
There is not really
yeah.
glide ratio would be it.
That'd be it.
That's
Okay.
it. Okay.
That's just like distance, isn't it?
Just distance.
Yeah.
If everything else is controlled, distance is all that matters. If your height, if the release height and the propulsion method, which is just going to be you throwing it, if you've controlled that as best you can,
Yeah.
right? You know that you're throwing it at the height of Sergei's arm and at the force of Sergei's arm, and you've just done it 9 times to eliminate variability.
Yeah.
That's as good as we're going to get at this level of experimentation. We don't have wind tunnels. We're not Boeing or Lockheed. Yep. Okay, so we're good? Okay, I'm going to hit